and welcome you all to today's town hall. My name is Mara Wahbe, and I am the Manager of Government Affairs and Science Policy here at ASPET. And I'm thrilled to welcome you to today's town hall, where we will be talking about pharmacology advocacy at ASPET, and specifically introducing the Washington Fellows Program with a brief introduction to the Science Policy Committee. Before we get started, I just wanted to get some housekeeping items out of the way. So if you have any questions for the panel throughout the presentation, just make sure to either put your question in the chat and I'll be happy to ask it for you during the Q&A, or hold on to your question until the last 15 to 20 minutes, which will be our Q&A, and you can ask it yourself. By attending this town hall, you consent to ASPET's Code of Conduct, and you also consent to having your questions and chat recorded for us to use at a later time. So to ground us a little bit for today's session, this is what we will be going over. So I will go through a quick introduction to ASPET policy and advocacy to sort of give context for where the Washington Fellows Program falls into the larger advocacy work that ASPET does. I'll give it to some of our panelists to introduce the Science Policy Committee and the Washington Fellows Program Subcommittee, which is hosting today's webinar. Then we'll spend the majority of the session talking about the Washington Fellows Program, what the program is, what it offers, why you should apply if you are eligible, the timeline, application, all that stuff. And then we'll get into a moderated discussion with current alumni who we'll introduce in a second. And we'll get into a Q&A for the last 15 to 20 minutes for you to ask any questions you may have. So to introduce today's panelists, we have 3 former fellows of the program and 1 current fellow of the program. I'll just quickly say who they are and what they do. So we have Adam Cusack, who is the health scientist administrator at the NIH Office of Dietary Supplements and the director of the ODS Analytical Methods and Reference Materials Program. He was in the program in 2013. We have Lindsay Galbothoma, who is currently a postdoc at the University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio, and she was in the program in 2020. Elijah Ullman, who just graduated with his PhD in molecular and systems pharmacology from Emory, and was in the program in 2023. And then Helen, if you want to pronounce your last name, I've been struggling with pronouncing it, but Ibawuchi. Ibawuchi, there we go. Who is a current fellow and hasn't completed the program yet, but will be with us until May. I'm very excited to have all of these incredible people and incredible alumni and current fellows. As you can see from the slide, that the 3 alumni of the program are very engaged with ASPET through our Science Policy Committee and its various subcommittees. So to give an overview of just ASPET's general policy work as sort of what guides the work that we do in the Washington Fellows Program and broadly within ASPET. So in the diagram here on the right, you see the ASPET's focus areas that sort of are part of our general strategic plan as an organization. Oh, sorry, Elijah.
Hey, your screen isn't shared.
Oh. Let me reshare my screen.
I can see it, Mara.
Oh, can you see it now?
Oh.
Okay, I'll keep going. Let me know if you can't see it later, Elijah. The diagram here, like I said, is ASPET's focus areas as part of our larger strategic plan as an organization. So these elements essentially ground our work at ASPET and therefore ground our advocacy work specifically within the Department of Government Affairs and Science Policy. So what does that mean? It essentially means that we are a member-focused, we do member-focused advocacy in order to be a leading voice in the field of pharmacology and be a resource for elected officials, for relevant agencies, and be the connector between the scientists, the members, all of you, and those who make policies that impact all of you. So how do we do that? So again, we advance the interests of ASPET members to elected officials, relevant agencies. We work with coalition partners that have aligned goals, and to the broader scientific biomedical science community. And we do that primarily, we develop most of our policy issues that we, again, advance to elected officials through all of you, the members. And it happens through the Science Policy Committee, which I'll let Adam talk to you about in a little bit. And it's comprised of members, it's comprised of scientists who are in the field of pharmacology. So some of our main policy interests here at ASPET include biomedical research funding and appropriations, drug policy issues, ethical use of animals in research, and the biomedical research workforce, all of which are impacted and do impact pharmacology. And those are the main issues that we focus on and base a lot of our advocacy work in. And like I said, we do that primarily through our Science Policy Committee, and I'll let Adam talk to you a little bit about that.
Thanks, Mara. Pleasure to be with you all this morning. So just a little bit more on the Science Policy Committee, as Mara set up. So this is members of ASPET, currently at 17 voting members. There's also chair and co-chair. Membership it goes through a application nomination process, and then members are selected by the committee. Overall, the committee works to, as outlined here, identify and respond to those policy issues that are of particular interest to ASPET membership, to the areas for ASPET of membership is most interested in. So Mara talked about a few of those topic areas in the prior slide. And as you're taking a look at, this space of science policy, you may have been hearing things in terms of there's policy for science that may come in terms of, what kind of policy from NSF or NIH granting institutions, things to try to drive science. And there's also science for policy, getting the data, getting the analyses that are going to inform what policies should be, whether governmental policies or research policies or the like. So in terms of ASPET and the SBC specifically, a lot of those identifying and responding to are areas where, perhaps NIH or NSF are putting out requests for information about, various processes or approaches, focus areas relevant to, again, grant opportunities or funding of science. ASPET is looking at those, is responding to those. ASPET is also involved with other kind of sister or partner societies, one in particular being the FASEB. So through the Science Policy Committee, that's one way ASPET participates in the broader Federation of Associations for Science and Experimental Biology program. And again, they're looking at, providing input to those types of calls for information. The group is also, in areas where maybe that's partnering in a response, addressing an issue, maybe areas where, again, very particular to ASPET interests. So the Science Policy Committee has subgroups. As Mara mentioned, there is a subgroup particular to the Washington Fellows. There's also subgroups for drug research policy, animals in research, appropriations, early career scientists, and policy and advocacy. So again, focusing on these areas where ASPET can help members engage and advocate, promote in the interests of the society. So that's the education component as well, on the impacts that the public affairs and advocacy has on science, and then developing these opportunities to become more involved. And certainly the Washington Fellows Program is one of those areas that getting membership more involved, but then others as well, programming at the annual meeting or additional webinars or things like that. So quick kind of overview on activities of the science policy, kind of where ASPET plays into this. And so I'll now pass on to Lindsay, and she'll tell us more about the Washington Fellows Program specifically.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad that you are all here. And I will piggyback off of what Adam was talking about and again, just describe really briefly to you. We have a Washington Fellows Program Subcommittee. That's a subcommittee of the science policy that was just instituted, I think, about a year ago. And Adam and I are co-chairing this subcommittee. And the purpose of this subcommittee is to support early career scientists who are interested in gaining skills in science policy through the Washington Fellows Program. And so we work really closely with our government affairs department, including Mara and Carter, as well as the Science Policy Committee. And we assist in the programming of the entire fellowship and the content of that fellowship. And we also participate in trainee recruitment, such as reviewing applications and marketing to hope that you all show up to things like this to learn more, as well as, again, developing the curriculum and improving it if we need to, or based on suggestions of former participants. And also recruiting speakers for different informational webinars that you get to attend as a fellow, which I'll speak about again in a moment. Next slide. Okay, so an overview of the Washington Fellows Program. What is the mission or the goals of it? And it's to enable developing and early career scientists who are interested in science policy to learn about and become more engaged in public policy issues. And so this is geared towards graduate students, postdocs, and early career researchers within 4 years of their postdoctoral training. And so we bring those folks on board, and they don't have to have any prior policy experience, just a strong interest and in learning more about how to get involved. Next slide. Thank you. And so there's several outcomes or deliverables for folks who are participating in the Washington Fellows Program, which include those listed here. So this includes developing an understanding of how public policy decisions are made. And so, as I mentioned, there are some informational sessions or lectures, I guess that you could call it, that you attend, and the folks in our government affairs department will teach you about all the different branches of government and how legislation becomes policy, things like that. We also discuss ASPET's policy issues, which both Mara and Adam have touched on, include things like funding for the NIH and the NSF, advocating for the humane use of animals in research, and increasing or looking at policies that affect the biomedical research workforce. And one of the primary goals of the fellowship is to prepare you to advocate effectively on Capitol Hill. And so there's a Hill Day that you get to go to DC and meet with staff members or politicians themselves and discuss some of ASPET's policy issues with them. You're also required to develop a policy brief, which will be published in an ASPET member communication, such as the Pharmacologist or the ASPET Advocacy brief. So if you are currently an ASPET member, you might see those come through your inbox, I think about monthly. We also have the fellows organize an advocacy activity, and one of the greatest benefits of participating in this program is expanding your network. So not only are you meeting other early career researchers like yourself, you're also meeting other individuals on the Science Policy Committee who have participated in the program before or are involved with science policy issues. You get to establish relationships with people at Capitol Hill. And then you get to come to the meeting and the annual ASPET meeting and meet with other former alumni of the program there as well. Next slide, please. So this is a timeline to show you all of the things that are involved in the Washington Fellows Program that I just went over. So the applications open in May and are due in June. We will send out notice of awards to people who are invited to join this fellowship program in August, and then the program starts in September. So between September and February, approximately weekly, there are these informational sessions or lectures like I talked about, and we recruit different individuals to talk about different topics that they, might be highly qualified to speak about. For example, I've had the opportunity to talk about advocating for animals in research to fellows the last couple of years. And you can see some other examples of the types of topics that are covered throughout these sessions. Towards the end of February or early March is the Hill Day. So again, you get to come to DC and we get to go to Capitol Hill and meet with our Congress people and talk to them about the policies that are important to us and membership. And then in April, your policy brief is due, and in May, the program concludes after you finish your outreach project. And everybody is, of course, invited to the annual ASPET meeting. This year we are in Portland, not sure where it's at next year. And again, there's a networking opportunity there with former fellows, and also an opportunity to present any policy posters if that's something that is of interest to you. And so briefly, I'll go over the application requirements for the program. You have to meet eligibility criteria, which again, you must be a graduate student, postdoc, or early career researcher within 4 years of your postdoctoral training. We like to look for fellows who have a strong interest in science policy advocacy, communication, and outreach, and you'll describe your interest in these things in the application with short answers. You also upload your CV that includes relevant experience in positions such as different volunteer work you may have done, public outreach, committees, etc. You have the opportunity to submit a personal statement and also a letter of recommendation that can either come from your PI or maybe somebody who you've worked, closely with, or was your mentor in some type of volunteer work that you've done or outreach work that you've done. It doesn't necessarily have to be the PI of your laboratory. Okay. And I think that's the last slide, so I will hand it back to Mara.
Thank you. Let me unshare my screen. Let's see, there we go. All right, so now we're just gonna now that we've gone over an overview of the program, I wanted to go through some questions for our past fellows who were in the program before to give you an idea of why they applied, what was their experience like, and then we'll leave some time at the end for your questions. Again, if you have any questions already, feel free to put them in the chat or hold them until the open time. So we'll get started with just a quick what motivated you to apply to the program. And maybe we'll go through the panelists by seniority. So Adam, Lindsay, Elijah, Helen, and see, why did you apply to the Washington Fellows program?
So that's to me first, Mara?
Yeah.
So if I am not mistaken, I was in the inaugural class of the Fellows program. And so it was certainly quite exciting to see at the time. And I was in my postdoc, and I had kind of figured that a tenure track professor was not the career path that I was gunning for. And I was doing my postdoc in the NIH, and so very much getting interested in that realm of scientific program administration, policy areas. So it was a fantastic opportunity to begin exploring that realm. And it's just kind of the right timing on it. I was involved in a science policy discussion group amongst postdocs. And so kind of the gears were already spinning on that one for me.
Lindsay?
Yeah, so as Mara mentioned at the beginning, I was in the program in 2020. And so when I applied in 2019, I would have just started or it would have been the second year of graduate school for me. And I was doing substance use disorder research for my dissertation, and I was working with non-human primates. And I had this realization that, which Adam kind of alluded to with his introduction of the SPC, I had this realization that not only does policy affect our research, but also our research affects policy. So again, I was thinking about this in the context of drug policy because I was doing drug research essentially. And I started to get really interested in drug policy, but I was very intimidated. It's just, different language, different everything than what I was familiar with. And I'm not even sure how I became aware of I don't recall how I became aware of the Washington Fellows Program, but I did somehow. And I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to apply for this. This sounds really interesting and exactly the training that I need to, you know, learn if this is something that is actually an interest worth continuing to pursue or not. So I applied and was very fortunate to have been selected.
Thank you, Lindsay. Elijah?
Hey, so I applied while I think I was like a third year in graduate school, and I applied for a few reasons. One of them, Lindsay encouraged me to do it. Her and I had worked together on a lot of other drug policy issues together through another organization. And my roommate at the time had also done it 2 years before me. So I think the year after Lindsay, actually. And I'd been doing drug policy advocacy since I was 15 and knew I wanted to be involved. And really, it seemed like ASPET was going to be the perfect place to learn how to be a better advocate, but eventually transition to writing policy by getting trained by scientists, by the premier pharmacology society in the nation. But I thought that this would be the best place for me to learn how to do policy advocacy in another lens. And yeah, I really was not mistaken when I went back to Washington for our Hill Day, and I hadn't gone since I think I was 17. I immediately, really felt at home in DC and going from office to office, talking to the lawmakers' staffs. So it really helped cement what I wanted to do for a career. It was absolutely worth the time.
Thank you, Elijah. Helen?
I applied to the program actually to gain more knowledge on how to navigate the science policy and advocacy landscape. I'm a physician by profession, but I decided to go into training medical students after the pandemic because a lot of people left the profession and we have a shortage of healthcare professionals. But prior to that, I also wanted to go into research. So I went back to gain a little bit more knowledge. And that was when I realized that not a lot of research is done with underrepresented population. So this is what prompted me. And the very first project that I wanted to work on was, with people that are underrepresented. And then at that time, I started thinking about it. How do I get this message across? So the opportunity did not arise until, I joined ASPET, and then I learned about the Washington Fellows Program. So I decided this is what I was going to do. And then I relocated to the Appalachian region, and, just the unique health issues that they have and the disparity between healthcare in the rural and the urban setting in the United States is just so glaring, and they just have these unique challenges. And I think, they need someone to be able to push this forward. So this is, why I applied to the program.
Thank you all. What sort of experience did you have in the policy space before applying to the program, if any? And if it wasn't experience, what kind of work did you do that you felt like the skills were transferable when you applied to the program? And we'll start again with that.
So I had mentioned that as a postdoc, the organization, we had a science policy discussion group. And so it basically, in some ways, structured like a journal club. Different topic areas would be dug into each month. And I forget the timing exactly, but I was either a member of that group or one of the co-chairs at the time that I applied. So there was exposure in that sense. And then another thing that I was working on, and again, I forget the exact timing, but I was involved kind of as a adjunct fellow with a particular organization, Institute on Science for Global Policy, that was started up some years ago. And their approach was to convene these very large kind of like town hall meetings that would bring local and federal or national officials into a meeting and then have policy position papers presented to those officials. And so I had heard about this group. They're looking for helping hands in terms of preparing for those meetings, helping the experts prepare their policy briefs. I had heard about this through the network of other postdoctoral fellows that some were involved. And I was so I had some experience there in terms of kind of like working with the subject matter expert to pull together the policy paper or write a summary statement of the debate that had been recorded.
Go ahead, Lindsay.
Yeah, so I didn't have really any policy experience when I applied. As I said a few moments ago, I kind of like had this realization that it was something that was interesting to me. So right before I ended up applying for the Washington Fellows Program, I also heard about this other policy organization, Students for Sensible Drug Policy, which is how Eli and I eventually met. But a friend of mine had told me about this organization, and I looked into them, and it was really interesting to me. And with this organization, you can start chapters at your institution. And so I decided I wanted to start a chapter where I was getting my PhD at Wake Forest. And I was recruiting people to join the chapter. In order for it to be, officially recognized by the institution, you had to have a certain number of people who are committing to joining it and identify a faculty advisor and kind of have, some missions and goals and things like that. So I hadn't really done any policy work, but I was working on it. And so I had, talked about that in I think that we got approved and like officially recognized by the institution right before the Washington Fellows Program application was due. So I could put that into my personal statement. But other than that, I didn't really have experience before, just a really strong interest, and that was enough.
Aisha?
So I didn't have any experience writing policy before. I had a lot of experience with advocacy. And yeah, Lindsay just mentioned it. We started this science policy committee for Students for Sensible Drug Policy. So that was a place for students who were working in neuroscience and really pharmacology to do drug policy work. And this was even before ASPET's Drug Research Policy Subcommittee, which I'm also part of. And so that's where I had done a lot of my advocacy work. But we had, through that policy committee, we had included comments on some drug policy related bills, and then also drafted some fact sheets. We had also created some advocacy alerts. So, fill out this form to rapidly contact your senator or congressperson to advocate for increases in science funding or to talk about a certain bill. And we had also done a few virtual full days on drug policy stuff. So I really came into this all through the lens of drug policy.
Helen?
So I did not have any prior experience whatsoever. This is actually my first exposure to what it takes. And I was actually motivated by my mentor, who is a pharmacologist, talking about issues that, that has to do with policy. And then at the last meeting that we had in Washington, D.C., I was opportune to be there. I couldn't make it to the Hill Day, but one of my colleagues that came, kind of gave me an idea of what it was all about. And then I talked to the fellows, that were there at the meeting, and that was what just sparked my interest. So since I came back and I have been in the program, I found out that I'm just naturally, motivated to do this. I have a passion for it. So I've started talking to other faculty and people, other scientists about, having a kind of an outreach. We want to make it really big sometime in the future, but we're having a pilot, sometime next month. So from not having any prior experience or exposure, whatever, and within the space of about a year, getting to where I am now, I'm really excited about what I have learned, in this program.
Thank you, Helen. So I think that goes to show like the spectrum of how much experience or no experience one needs to have to apply to the program. So if you do have experience, you're welcome to apply. And if you don't, the program is here for you to teach you and give you the experience that you might need to be involved in science policy. I guess, how did the program help you with your career or advocacy involvement? Do you feel like you are more involved in advocacy? Do you feel like it changed sort of or influenced the direction of your career in any way? Again, I'll start with Ad.
I think one main thing is that it was a fantastic, successful opportunity to figure out what I wanted to do. So, there was very much the okay, science policy, but what? There's so many facets of that. What does that mean, and what possibilities there, are of interest to me? And so it was again a fantastic way to explore, to experience, aspects of engagement on the Hill, aspects of putting together. At the time, we weren't writing policy briefs, but we were putting together basically informational materials, kind of background briefs for members of Congress. So being able to do those kinds of activities, and again, figuring out, is that something that, really piques the interest and where I want to go? And having had that experience as I pursued other opportunities, fellowships or training, definitely, having completed the program is a really good thing to have on, your CV as you're applying to additional types of things that you might be interested in, jobs or fellowships or other positions.
Thank you, Adam. Lindsay?
Yeah, so I am still on track right now to pursue a career in academia, not a career in policy, but my involvement in the Washington Fellows program has definitely opened doors for me to stay involved in science, policy, and advocacy for the last several years. And I've done a lot of different stuff, again, that has stemmed from initially participating in the program. So for example, I've been really lucky to have been invited back to participate in the program as a guide. So on the Hill Day, we invite some alumni from the program to be sort of like mentors. And so if you are a fellow, you get paired with another fellow and a guide, and the guide will take you around the Hill. We aren't going to just throw you to the wolves. So they're there to help. And so that's been really exciting to go back. I am involved with the ASPET Science Policy Committee and the Washington Fellows Subcommittee. I continued being really involved with Students for Sensible Drug Policy in a couple of different ways with my own chapter. And as Eli mentioned, we even founded a science policy committee within Students for Sensible Drug Policy. And I also, it also helped me secure another type of fellowship. So it's the Biomedical Research Awareness Day Fellowship, which is an animal research advocacy fellowship that's 1 year long that I completed last year. And it wasn't necessarily policy focused because it's a nonprofit organization, so we weren't going to the Hill or anything like that. But I got to use a lot of what I learned, especially like science communication, to talk to the general public about the importance of animals in research. And that's something that I learned from participating in this program, because that's what we talked to Congress people about when we went to the Hill. So it's really, even though I'm not necessarily pursuing a career in science policy or advocacy, I've been involved in a lot of things since participating in the program, and it just helped me to stay involved for sure.
Thanks, Lindsay. Elijah?
Yeah, so when I applied for it, I wasn't exactly certain what I wanted to do for a career. I was thinking, maybe I'll be a bench scientist. I really love electrophysiology. It's really fun to do experiments. But, I've been doing advocacy since I was 15, so it was important. I got into science at the same time I got into drug policy stuff. So those two evolved together, and I can't separate them out. Adam mentioned earlier, science for policy and policy for science. And at least that's how it should go in Washington. But there's a lot of, different interests that can prevent that from being reality. And I thought it would be important to use my training as a pharmacologist, with the PhD, to be able to go to the Hill and talk with lawmakers and, really be able to use what I learned throughout my graduate degree. Use the training of how do you ask a question, and what I think science does really well is it teaches you how to ask, how are you wrong? What are all the ways that my idea is wrong? So if a lawmaker is writing a bill, they're often not actually thinking, how am I wrong? But it often is, how will this go with my constituents? Is this going to help my reelection? But there's more to it than that. And being a scientist helps you take whatever that policy idea is that they want to institute and ask, if we write it this way, what are the 10 different ways that it can be interpreted? How can it be used for good to help people or to harm people if we write it one way or the other? And I think this program really helped cement those ideas that I could be involved, that this is a realistic career as a scientist as well. I mean, it was incredibly helpful.
Thank you. Helen?
I want to say that I am so grateful for this opportunity because I have learned a lot within a short space of time, and I am still curious to learn more. The first thing that I learned in the program is that Bill Foster is the only congressman with a PhD in science. And I'm like, wow, and we have so many of them there. So this was actually an eye-opener for me. And then going on, this program has really equipped me with the tools that I need to continue to develop my career and navigate science, policy, and advocacy. That's something I think is going to come up later. For now, I have, really learned to engage with science policy as a scientist in academia. I have learned how to write a policy brief. I have also been introduced to the whole policy process. And the cool thing that I took away from that was that you can go in at any point in the cycle, whether it's from, writing the proposal or the action or during the implementation process. You can go in, you don't have to be, the one that is actually, you don't need to go in at the stage of the proposal, which is what I had always thought, that's what I needed to do. So it's so cool to learn about the whole process, everything that goes on, the courts and all that. I think it's just the information that I got from this program I don't think I could have gotten it from anywhere else. And it's really helped me. And I'm using all of the tools and the resources right now. And I think it's going to help to push my career further in the future.
Thank you, Helen. Oh, Lindsay.
I just wanted to add something to that question and that Helen just really touched on. I think that something we can all probably agree on, and anybody who's participated in the program, is that the program really boosts your confidence. It's one of my favorite things as a guide is to see the fellows, become more confident throughout the day. It's really nerve-wracking to be like, wow, I'm going to DC and I'm going into this politician's office right now. That's pretty terrifying at first, but by the end of the day, everybody's like, can we have more meetings? And I can't wait to come back and do this again. And so I think that that's something really important that I just wanted to point out, is that it really makes you confident in your ability to talk to other, to Congress people and to lawmakers, and to keep doing that, after being involved initially with the program, and to teach others to do it too, and kind of just demystify how scary it might seem at first.
Thank you. And also kind of to see again the spectrum of like, not everybody who joins the program wants a career in science policy, like whether you are interested in a career in science policy or you just want to be an advocate and learn more about science policy as an academic, the program is accessible to all of you. I will open the floor for questions. Does anyone have any thoughts, questions they want to ask our panel? You can raise your hand or just unmute yourself. I'll give you all a second. Okay. If no one has any questions, I'll ask a few. And again, if anything pops up, feel free to unmute yourself, raise your hand, or put it in the chat. Obviously, as part of the application process, there's a personal statement. Can you all share a little bit about what you included in your personal statement? Again, because that got you into the program. So if any of you want to mute and kind of take that, you're welcome to. I'll keep it open.
Yeah, I can speak up on this. So as I mentioned, I didn't have any previous policy experience when applying. And so I really just leaned into my strong interests in learning about policy. Again, coming from a point of primarily drug policy because I was doing substance use disorder research, but also I worked with animals. I had been at that point working with non-human primates for, I think, maybe like 5 years, which is, you know, a unique position to be able to speak on that when advocating for animal research. I had also worked with a lot of other species, including dogs and cats. And so I kind of leaned into, you know, my experience working with those different species, drug policy interests. And then I had also attended this small conference. I had won an award to go to it, and it was like an emerging, oh my gosh, I can't remember what it was. Emerging researchers in cannabis and psychedelic policy or something like that. So I brought that up in my personal statement to, again, kind of showcase how dedicated I was to substance use disorder, drugs and drug policy, even though I never ended up studying cannabis or psychedelics, but that's okay. So yeah, those were just some of the things that I touched on, and also how I was starting that chapter of Students for Drug Policy, Students for Sensible Drug Policy, and some of the things that I wanted to do with that chapter.
So for me, I discussed a little bit about my background and how I got into research and why I was interested in the program. Mine stems from a passion for scientific research and a deep commitment, you know, to advancing scientific knowledge and how this knowledge, you know, informs and shapes, you know, effective public policies, including, you know, policies that will suggest or support scientific research, especially for people with diverse, underserved, or underrepresented population. And the interests of being a leader, even in academia, being a leader in science policy. So those were I would think were the unique things that probably would made my application stand out. I don't know, but I actually was able to communicate my passion for scientific research and also advocacy.
Thank you all. Not to cut off the conversation with the rest of the panelists, but we got a question in the chat. Do you have an estimate of how many applications are submitted each cycle and how many positions are available? I guess I could probably answer that. We accept 10 fellows every year, and the applications kind of vary between the years. Obviously, like 2020, 2019, we had less applications than usual, but it varies. I would say between like 30 to 20 applications, or 20 to 30 applications to be more accurate. But again, that changes every year, but that's kind of a medium estimate of the application number, but in terms of positions, there's 10 per year. We have another question. Given the significant changes occurring at the federal level right now, does this program anticipate any potential issues going forward? Do you want to elaborate on what you mean by that? So what do you mean, I guess, anticipate potential issues going forward in terms of like the program changing?
Sure. So access to obviously Hill Day is a big attracting feature. Communication with federal government has been difficult in recent weeks. Those are the kind of issues I'm at. Like, do you anticipate that being something you're planning for, or is it like just something that's happening right now and hopefully it'll be cleared up by next cohort?
It's a good question. I don't think it'll impact like the programming of the program because going to Congress and speaking to your elected officials is not really impacted by the federal funding freezes or anything like that. So the Hill Day will hopefully continue unless a global pandemic happens and we have to stay home. But even then we'll do a virtual meeting. But yeah, the Congress meetings, the Hill Day will continue as planned. In terms of our speakers, all of our speakers are ASPET members and represent ASPET during the sessions, so that also should not be an issue. So again, if you're asking about the programming of the program and how things go internally, nothing should be different in the next cohort over the next year. Obviously, the changing landscape of science policy will be discussed in the program as part of the stuff that we're learning about and going through, but in terms of programming, the program will continue as planned. I hope that answers your question.
It does, yes.
Any other questions? I guess I'll ask about Hill Day specifically. What was Hill Day like for you? Do you have any, I mean, no, Helen hasn't been on Hill Day yet, but for the alum of the program, what was Hill Day like? Do you have any stories that you feel like are worth sharing from the day of Hill Day that folks would be interested in hearing about?
I can go. I don't think I have particularly exciting or like incredibly interesting stories from this Hill Day, in that we were advocating for increasing science funding, and I'm in Georgia. I was meeting with the two senators' offices, so they're both Democrats, and then the two House offices who are also Democrats in Atlanta. They were easy. They're Democrats. They're going to say, yeah, we support increasing science funding. The staffers are they're usually 20-something-year-olds, and those are the people that actually end up writing a lot of the laws anyways that the senators or congresspersons will put forward. So Washington is really run by very young people, and just seeing that, because before I had done the Hill Day, the last time I had went, I was 17, so I was still a high schooler, and everyone looked so much older than me. But going and just saying, oh, these are people like my age. None of these people are scary. What they can do, depending, can be very, very scary and very bad. But it also can be very good. There's really incredible staffers as well. It was just exciting and fun to walk around the halls of Congress. It's inspiring to be in DC because that's where so much good for the world has happened, but at the same time, so much bad. And I think it's our job as people who will get a PhD, have an MD, whatnot, these advanced degrees that are highly respected, to engage with politicians' offices, because they're supposed to serve us at the end of the day. Only about 10% of Congress has a STEM degree anyways. So it's 50 some odd members of Congress have a STEM related degree. It's really not that many. and really getting to bring perspectives of, let's say, we're advocating for National Science Foundation funding. So basic research on how to make a chemical reaction occur. Okay, how does that help medicine whatsoever, right? Getting to connect the ideas of, look, well, if we can make a reaction happen more efficiently, or with cheaper materials, you can use that in the manufacture of medicines, and that'll drive down costs, or it should. Who knows if it will, but it should drive down costs. And that idea really seemed to resonate with some staffers, and one particular was a teacher, was a former teacher. And so he really hadn't thought of how those two ideas were connected and went, oh, okay. So it seemed like a light bulb went off in our head. And that was really fun for me to get to, teach a teacher. But again, that the Hill is run by 20-year-olds. They're not scary people. After you've done your closed door defense or, your qualifying exam, like you're already used to being in a room with people that are trying to break you. None of this is scary. These are just people that are supposed to, ask questions about how, whatever you're advocating for. So they're usually friendly. Every interaction on both sides of the aisle, almost every interaction has been friendly. I've had tough meetings with some offices, but again, they're young people. Like they're more often pretty enthusiastic and how do I say, dynamic. Yeah.
I was going to say, and you are the expert in the room on
Yeah.
the topic that you're bringing to the table. So that's also always nice to remember when you're going to the Hill.
Yeah, I'm just like sitting here giggling while Eli was talking, just because I'm thinking back, because as I said, I've been fortunate to be invited back as a guide. So I've a couple of them were virtual, but had a lot of meetings the last few years. And it's just a huge spectrum of like how the Hill Day is. Like he said, it's a lot of young, we call them staffers, who are working in these offices. It's not super common that you get to actually meet with the politician, but occasionally. And it's kind of just like a wild card as to the personality of the staffer that you get. I remember my very first meeting on my very first Hill Day. I was so nervous. I like stayed up late studying my fact sheets so I could memorize it. And then I got into that office, and he was a very young staffer. I think it might have been his first day. And he wasn't even like listening, because I think he was just so trying to like figure out what he was doing, you know what I mean? And so I walked out of there. I'm like, well, that was not like this big intimidating thing that I had built up in my mind. I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm older than that guy. And I've gone to living in North Carolina for most of my Hill days. So meeting with, Congress people from North Carolina, and they're quite supportive of funding the NIH and the NSF. So those meetings are typically always quite easy. I remember I had one with one guy, and he was just like, yeah, I've been to Wake Forest. I've seen the non-human primate facility. Like, we love it. We support it. And I'm like, okay, what else do you want to talk about? Even, sometimes the meetings can get a little derailed. When I was a guide one time, you kind of introduce yourself when you first sit down with the staff member, and just tell them in lamest terms as possible what you do for research. And one of the fellows that I was with was explaining how she studies vaping, e-cigs, basically. And the staffer goes, oh my God, I love vaping, and starts asking a bunch of questions about vaping and the risks and the harms. And we had to kind of be like, wait, can we talk about science funding though? And, circle back. But it was a really friendly conversation. And sometimes people are, a little more short. They have a lot of meetings every single day. They're very, very busy, and they're just trying to like take notes and of what you say, and then they're ready to go. But largely, it's always a very positive experience. And like Mara said, you are the expert in the room. And, if it's something that this person hasn't heard before, like they'll ask questions, and it feels good being able to answer them for them.
Allow space for any questions.
I ask one of the other panelists?
Yeah, go for it.
What's the worst part, or what's your least favorite part of science policy advocacy, or most frustrating?
Nothing is frustrating. I'm
Nothing
just kidding.
frustrating.
Okay.
I think sometimes every once in a while, you know, there's a difficult conversation, and it's not that that's, I don't want to say it's frustrating, it's just difficult. I can give another example of a Hill Day meeting. It was the only time I've actually gotten to actually meet the politician. It was a House representative, and we were trying to advocate for animal research, and he was just like, my wife does not support, you know, like big farming and, you know, shoving a bunch of cows into small spaces and chickens and things like that. And we were like, that's not what we're talking about. You know, we're talking about animals used for biomedical research. And he kept just kind of circling back to that. And trying to ask questions about big agriculture and things. And again, we kept trying to separate the two, and it was just difficult. And we kind of had to like just give up a little bit because he wasn't really listening. So sometimes you just get met with stuff like that. And sometimes it's, you know, in any conversation in your daily life, sometimes it's best to just kind of, you know, back off and just be like, I tried. That's, I think, can be the most frustrating part, but I don't think that that happens as often as, you know, the positives, getting to change somebody's mind, getting to share new information with somebody or answer their questions. I think that that highly outweighs any of the frustrating parts.
Adam?
I don't think frustration necessarily, but it was interesting to learn it, observe it, is that, you know, what Lindsay was touching upon in some ways, just seeing how in the overall process and efforts and you know, thinking about these issues and talking to people, that from what I've seen, there's not a, okay, done, what's the next thing? Done, what's the next thing? It's the understanding that kind of the way things are is these issues, we're always talking about these issues. And so it is, there's always someone new to talk to about it, but it's just kind of understanding that in that realm, it's not, you know, we made our case, everyone agrees with us, and now we can move on to the next thing.
Thank you all. For the sake of time, I'll just quickly ask one last question, and maybe one of you could just answer it. One of you who has reviewed applications before, what do you think reviewers look for in the application when someone submits for the program?
I've reviewed applications the last 2 years, and what I'm looking for is enthusiasm for sure. Like we've said multiple times, science policy experience is not required. I think just, you know, wanting to learn more and also identifying to your reviewers something that you're, you know, very passionate about, is, you know, a big and important one for me.
Thank you all. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you all for joining us. If you have any other questions about the program or about ASPET policy and advocacy more broadly, feel free to email me or just publicaffairs@aspet.org, and we will be happy to answer you. Have a great rest of your day, and hope to see your applications in May. Have a great day. Bye, everyone.